Maya's feet ached in a way that no amount of stretching could soothe. Her fingers were raw from scrubbing counters and folding endless piles of laundry, and yet she forced herself onward. The apartment she shared with her little sister was miles away, but the thought of their empty fridge and the overdue school fees pressed her forward like a heavy weight she couldn't drop. Even on the subway ride to the Kane mansion, she felt her eyelids fluttering, her body craving rest that she could not afford to give. 2 jobs, a part-time cleaning gig, and the constant worry of making ends meet somehow, she had become both the engine and the fuel, running herself ragged to keep her family afloat. The Kane mansion was a different world entirely. The polished floors reflected every movement, the chandeliers gleamed with a cold perfection, and the scent of fresh flowers lingered faintly in the air, as though the house itself had been curated to perfection. Maya moved like a shadow, keeping her pace slow and careful, not wanting to disturb the harmony of a home so meticulously arranged. She dusted the grand staircases, polished silver trays in the kitchen, and folded stacks of designer clothes in rooms so large she sometimes lost track of where she was. Every corner demanded attention, every surface needed care, and yet she pressed on, driven by the same determination that had carried her through months of exhaustion. By the time she reached the master bedroom, Maya's body protested loudly. Her muscles trembled with fatigue, her back felt as if it had been carved from stone, and her mind threatened to slip into a fog that would have left her standing in place, helpless. The room itself seemed impossibly vast. The bed was enormous, draped in silk sheets that reflected the ambient light like liquid gold. A mountain of pillows sat neatly arranged, each one perfect in its alignment. Maya moved through the room with slow, deliberate motions, straightening the nightstands, smoothing the blankets, and making sure every detail was flawless. Her hands shook as she adjusted a photograph frame, and the sound of the frame clicking into place echoed through the quiet room, startling even her own ears. She had meant only to finish the chores and leave, but her body betrayed her. One misstep, a stumble over exhaustion, and she felt herself collapsing onto the bed. The sheets were softer than anything she had ever touched, and for the first time that day, a sense of relief washed over her. Her head sank into the pillows, and without the slightest warning, sleep claimed her completely. Her breathing slowed, her eyelids fluttered shut, and all the aches and tensions of the day melted into the momentary peace of slumber. Time became irrelevant. The mansion was silent except for the faint hum of distant lights, the soft ticking of a clock somewhere beyond her reach. Maya dreamed, not of luxury, not of the mansion, but of simpler things. Her sister's laughter, the smell of home-cooked meals, and the warmth of a life where she could breathe without constant pressure. And then, as dreams ebbed and flowed, reality waited just beyond the door, holding its breath for the moment she would awaken to consequences she could not have imagined. It was then that Alexander Kane returned earlier than expected. A man of habit, he usually arrived late in the evening, but tonight had demanded an urgent meeting downtown. The drive back had been uneventful, and he anticipated nothing unusual. When he opened the door to his master bedroom, he froze. There, sprawled across his silk sheets, was Maya, utterly vulnerable, completely unaware of the world around her. His initial reaction was a brief, sharp twinge of irritation. How could someone fall asleep in his bed? But as he stood there, studying her, irritation gave way to something unexpected. Her hair was tousled, her hands curled gently beneath her cheek, and the steady rhythm of her breathing filled the room with a calm she hadn't realized he craved. Alexander stepped closer, his polished shoes silent against the marble floor. He had seen many people in this house, employees, guests, even friends, but never someone like her. There was a fragility in her exhaustion, a human vulnerability that made the world of wealth and power he inhabited feel suddenly hollow. Most people, he reflected, would have panicked, perhaps screamed, or dashed to wake her, scolding for a transgression. Not him. Instead, he watched with a quiet fascination, his mind turning over the story that must have led her here. How many hours had she worked before this? How many nights had she sacrificed sleep for survival? The questions multiplied, and with them, a strange sense of admiration took root. Maya stirred, a soft murmur escaping her lips as she shifted in her sleep. Her eyes blinked open slowly, the sudden awareness of her surroundings hitting her with a jolt. Heart racing, she expected anger, a sharp voice, perhaps even the call to security. She braced herself, cheeks flushing with embarrassment as she tried to gather her scattered thoughts, murmuring a quiet apology to no one in particular. Instead of anger, Alexander simply smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curl of his lips that conveyed understanding without words. "You must be exhausted," he said softly, his voice steady, neither commanding nor scolding. "Go home. Rest. You deserve it." Maya froze, disbelief rooting her in place. Could someone like him, someone so far removed from the pressures of survival, truly understand what exhaustion felt like? Her throat constricted, words failing her entirely. She nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly, then gathered her courage to slip from the bed and retreat toward the door, leaving him standing in the quiet glow of the room, his gaze following her retreating figure. As she stepped into the cool night air outside the mansion, the city lights reflected her own fatigue back at her. Yet, for the first time in weeks, she felt a sliver of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel: hope. A man of immense wealth had seen her not as a servant, not as someone beneath notice, but as a person deserving of rest, deserving of kindness. It was a revelation that left her mind whirring, her heart fluttering against her ribs. Perhaps the world was not entirely unkind. Perhaps there were doors waiting to be opened, opportunities waiting to be discovered. Inside the mansion, Alexander remained still, a trace of awe lingering in his eyes. He replayed the scene repeatedly in his mind. The fragile rise and fall of her chest, the stubborn determination etched into her tired movements, and the quiet dignity with which she carried herself even in exhaustion. Wealth, he realized, meant nothing if it could not acknowledge the value of someone like Maya. The world he commanded felt suddenly smaller, more constricted, yet wider in its possibilities. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but in that instant, he understood the profound impact of witnessing someone's humanity in its rawest form. And so, in the stillness of the Kane mansion, a quiet bond began to form, unseen, unspoken, yet deeply present. The night stretched on, full of potential, carrying with it the promise of change. Maya would return to her life, to the relentless rhythm of work and survival, unaware of the impression she had left. Alexander would contemplate her presence long after the room fell silent, realizing that sometimes the smallest gestures, the most unexpected moments, could ripple far beyond their origin. The stage was set, unknowingly, for a story neither of them could have predicted, woven from exhaustion, compassion, and the fragile beauty of human vulnerability. Alexander couldn't shake the image of Maya from his mind. Even as he went through his evening routine, checking emails, reviewing contracts, and scanning the news, her presence lingered like a gentle shadow he could neither ignore nor dismiss. There was something in the way she carried herself, even in exhaustion, that fascinated him. The quiet strength, the resilience, the dignity that persisted despite every hardship she must endure. He found himself recalling the way her fingers had trembled over the picture frame, how she had adjusted the pillows with painstaking care, and even the soft, almost imperceptible sigh she had released as she drifted into sleep. He remembered the initial blush that had crossed her cheeks when she woke, that mix of embarrassment and caution. Most people would have expected anger, or at least authority, but Alexander had chosen a different approach: compassion. It had been effortless to him, almost instinctive, yet it had left a profound impact on Maya, he realized. Perhaps he could offer more than a moment of kindness. Perhaps he could understand her world, even in small ways. His curiosity was no longer just professional or casual, it was personal. He wanted to see the person behind the exhaustion, behind the uniform, behind the soft, vulnerable exterior. The next morning, Alexander found himself arriving at the mansion earlier than usual, ostensibly to check on some paperwork, but in reality, he was waiting to see her again. He didn't know what compelled him. Was it genuine concern, fascination, or an inexplicable draw toward her? When Maya arrived, she was already in motion, moving from room to room with that same quiet diligence. Her movements were precise, practiced, almost like a dance, and her eyes carried the faint trace of yesterday's fatigue, though she had clearly tried to push it away. Alexander watched silently, admiring her dedication, and felt a rare sense of humility. Wealth and influence could not replace this kind of tenacity. As the day progressed, small moments of interaction unfolded. A dropped pen led to a shared glance. A brief smile passed across her lips when she noticed him noticing, and a word or two exchanged over instructions became an unexpected bridge between their worlds. "Do you need more cleaning supplies?" Alexander asked casually, though his tone carried genuine concern. Maya blinked, startled, and then shook her head softly. "No, sir. I have everything I need," she replied, her voice calm but tinged with surprise. Most people in his world would have seen such a question as patronizing, but Maya did not. She sensed the sincerity behind it, the effort to understand her circumstances rather than assert control. Curiosity turned into conversation slowly, carefully, with neither of them rushing the process. Alexander asked about her day, her family, and the reasons she worked so tirelessly. Maya, cautious at first, began to respond, sharing small pieces of her life. The story of a younger sister counting on her for school fees, of nights spent juggling multiple jobs, and the weight of responsibilities that most people could scarcely imagine. He listened intently, without interruption, absorbing each word with a respect that left Maya both unsettled and, strangely, comforted. For the first time, she felt truly seen not as a maid, not as a background character in someone else's life, but as a person worthy of attention and care. Alexander began to take subtle actions in response to what he had learned. He adjusted schedules to give her brief breaks, ensured that her workload did not overwhelm her, and even left notes of encouragement on the counter where she usually began her tasks. At first, Maya noticed these changes with quiet skepticism. People rarely showed care without some expectation in return, and yet these gestures were unassuming, small, and selfless. A brief note read, "You're doing better than you know. Take a deep breath." Another day, he placed a bottle of water and a small snack beside her station, a silent acknowledgement of her tireless efforts. Slowly, walls began to crumble, both literal and metaphorical. Alexander saw Maya laughing quietly at her own clumsiness when she tripped over a rug, brushing it off with grace. Maya saw Alexander leaning against the doorway, genuinely amused by her quiet humor, without judgment or superiority. Their interactions became the highlight of the day for both of them, unspoken acknowledgments of understanding, curiosity, and, eventually, trust. It was a bond that grew in silence as much as in conversation, a shared recognition of the human experiences often overlooked by wealth or circumstance. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city skyline in shades of orange and purple, Alexander found himself walking alongside Maya as she finished the last chores. They spoke about trivial things, favorite foods, childhood memories, small city anecdotes that had nothing to do with work or wealth. Maya with a soft laugh. Alexander chuckled, genuinely, a rare smile crossing his face. Moments like this, unforced and natural, created a connection neither of them had anticipated. Even in this casual setting, Alexander felt a surge of protectiveness and admiration. He realized that his fascination with Maya was more than fleeting. It was rooted in respect for her strength and compassion, her ability to navigate a harsh world without losing herself. And Maya, slowly, began to notice that his presence, his attentiveness, and the subtle kindnesses he showed were different from anything she had known. No one had ever paused to understand her world without judgment, to offer support without strings attached. As days turned into weeks, their interactions deepened. Alexander found himself seeking her opinions on matters far removed from her station, asking for her thoughts on artwork placement in the mansion, or requesting her input on household decisions. Maya, cautious yet intrigued, realized that he valued her perspective, not as a servant, but as an intelligent, thoughtful individual. Their conversations carried a growing intimacy, a comfort that was neither romantic nor formal, but somewhere in between, a delicate balance that encouraged honesty, vulnerability, and trust. Maya's heart fluttered at these moments, a strange mix of disbelief and hope. Could someone like him truly care for someone like her without expectation or condescension? Alexander's curiosity became admiration, his admiration became care, and care grew into a subtle, unspoken affection. Every gesture, every small act of recognition, built a bridge between their worlds. A friendship was forming, fragile yet resilient, like a sapling pushing through the cracks of a city sidewalk, stubbornly reaching toward sunlight. By the time the city lights blinked awake in the evening, Maya and Alexander had discovered an unspoken truth. Human connection could transcend the boundaries of wealth, status, or exhaustion. Compassion, curiosity, and understanding could build bridges where none seemed possible, and in this quiet, unfolding bond, they each found a rare solace. Alexander realized that his wealth had never mattered until he understood the value in people like Maya, and Maya discovered that even amidst overwhelming odds, kindness and trust could arrive in the most unexpected places. As they parted that night, Maya felt lighter than she had in weeks. Alexander lingered by the doorway, watching her retreat, a quiet sense of anticipation and warmth threading through his chest. The mansion felt less empty, the city less imposing, and the possibility of something meaningful, something transformative seemed to glimmer in the soft, amber glow of the evening lights. This was no longer just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of a connection neither of them had expected, yet both felt growing stronger with every shared glance, every word spoken, every moment of quiet understanding. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet rhythm of the Kane mansion became the backdrop for a bond neither Alexander nor Maya could have anticipated. The connection that had begun with exhaustion and compassion deepened into something more intricate, a delicate weaving of trust, curiosity, and mutual respect. Maya arrived each morning, her movements still careful and precise, yet now tinged with a subtle lightness, a sense of anticipation she could scarcely name. Alexander watched, sometimes from afar, sometimes from the doorway, as she navigated the mansion with grace, and each glance carried a quiet acknowledgement that their worlds were intersecting in unexpected ways. Alexander began to involve Maya in decisions that had nothing to do with cleaning. At first, it was small choosing floral arrangements, arranging books on shelves, or giving input on table settings. But gradually, he asked for her thoughts on broader matters, how to host charity events, opinions on artwork, even how to approach new hires with empathy. Maya, initially hesitant, began to realize that her voice mattered in ways she had never imagined. The mansion, once intimidating, became a place where her intellect and intuition could shine alongside her tireless work ethic. Alexander listened intently, genuinely valuing her perspective, and Maya felt a sense of empowerment that quietly shifted her self-perception. One afternoon, Alexander found her seated on the sunlit terrace, exhausted yet trying to review a small notebook filled with scribbled ideas for budgeting her sister's school fees. He walked over, not with commands or judgment, but simply to sit beside her. "You've been carrying everything alone for too long," he said softly. Maya looked up, startled, and he offered a gentle smile, one that carried neither pity nor superiority, only understanding. "You deserve support," he continued, "and sometimes that means letting someone else help without feeling ashamed." Maya felt the warmth of his words seep into her bones, a sensation unfamiliar yet welcome. She nodded slowly, the lump in her throat making her eyes glisten, realizing that for the first time in years, someone was offering assistance without expectation, without strings attached. Their conversations became more personal, exploring dreams, fears, and moments of vulnerability. Maya shared childhood stories, of her mother's laughter before illness claimed her, of the quiet evenings she had spent comforting her sister, of the fleeting joys that had punctuated her struggle. Alexander, in turn, recounted fragments of a life often misunderstood, of pressures that money could not alleviate, of loneliness hidden behind boardroom meetings and gala appearances, of a yearning for genuine connection. Through these exchanges, an unspoken intimacy blossomed, a sense that their hearts were discovering resonance in each other's truths. Small gestures, a hand placed on a shoulder for reassurance, a note left beside a teacup, a shared smile over a simple joke became threads in a tapestry of subtle romance. One evening, as rain fell softly against the terrace windows, Alexander invited Maya to help him organize a small event for a charitable foundation he supported. It was an unusual invitation, blending her organizational skills with her innate understanding of people. Maya hesitated, unsure whether she belonged in such a world, but Alexander's calm encouragement drew her in. "You see things I often overlook," he said. "I trust your judgment." Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted place cards and coordinated staff, yet there was a confidence in her movements, a quiet acknowledgement that she was stepping into a space that had previously felt inaccessible. Alexander watched, pride and admiration welling in his chest. As the night of the event unfolded, Alexander noticed the way Maya moved through the crowd, attentive, gracious, intuitive. Guests commented on her poise and the thoughtful touches she had suggested. Maya, who had entered the mansion weeks ago as a tired, overworked maid, now commanded respect in her own subtle way. Alexander felt a surge of recall. Person she had become through perseverance, intelligence, and integrity. He realized that their bond had evolved beyond curiosity and compassion. It was now a partnership, rooted in mutual trust, admiration, and the unspoken acknowledgement that they were transforming each other's worlds. Even in private moments, the tension between them shifted toward something tender, something quietly electric. Alexander would pause to watch her laugh at small jokes, to notice the intensity with which she approached tasks, to marvel at the patience she extended to others while often neglecting herself. Maya, in turn, began to notice his attentiveness, the way he considered her feelings, and the quiet moments when he allowed his guard to drop, revealing vulnerability rarely seen by anyone else. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to outsiders, yet each glance, each touch, each shared silence built a foundation stronger than either could articulate. Opportunities emerged naturally from their deepening connection. Alexander offered mentorship, suggesting ways Maya could advance her own aspirations beyond the mansion. He introduced her to contacts who could help with her sister's education, provided advice on financial planning, and even encouraged her to consider pursuing skills she had never had time for: photography, writing, or public speaking. Maya, who had always believed that her station in life was fixed, began to see a world of possibility opening before her. She felt empowered, not because of wealth, but because someone believed in her ability to navigate and shape her own future. There were also moments of gentle levity, shared stories, and private jokes that built a bridge of familiarity and comfort. In these fleeting, unguarded moments, the weight of status and expectation dissolved, leaving behind only two people discovering joy, trust, and connection. They began to realize that what had started with exhaustion and a shared glance had grown into something neither of them could have predicted: an evolving relationship built on understanding, mutual respect, and quiet affection. By the time weeks turned into months, Maya had transformed not only her circumstances, but her sense of self. Alexander had come to value her insights, her resilience, and her unwavering integrity. The mansion, once a symbol of distance and privilege, became a place of shared energy, ideas, and subtle romance. Alexander's gestures, small notes, shared coffees, private encouragements became a rhythm, a language they understood without words. And Maya, once timid in her own abilities, learned that trust, acceptance, and collaboration could elevate not only her life, but the lives of those she loved. Their connection remained understated, yet powerful. Alexander realized that wealth meant nothing if it could not cultivate relationships that mattered. Maya discovered that kindness, mentorship, and quiet support could open doors she had never dreamed of entering. Together, they began to navigate the delicate space between social worlds, bridging gaps with patience, understanding, and an emerging affection that was both gentle and exhilarating. The mansion, the city, and the world beyond were no longer barriers. They were opportunities, waiting to be shaped by two people willing to trust each other, respect each other, and, perhaps, love each other in ways neither had anticipated. Moral lesson: Maya and Alexander's story reminds us that human connection transcends status, exhaustion, and circumstance. Kindness can spark curiosity, trust can open doors, and small gestures can transform lives. Even in the most unexpected moments, empathy creates bridges, and courage nurtures growth. It's okay to ask for help, to let others see your vulnerabilities, and to trust someone who shows genuine care. The richest wealth lies not in money, but in recognition, support, and mutual respect. Life offers surprises when patience and openness guide us. Believe in kindness, embrace opportunity, and remember, even small actions ripple beyond imagination. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share with friends, and comment your perspectives or lessons learned.